Okay, so to kick things off, X-Men Apocalypse is the 6th official straightforward X-Men film.
As in team movie.
And third in the sequence of reboot
third in
from
like
First
the
Class.
origin trilogy thing that they've been doing.
Overall?
8th?
Then?
Yes. Soon to...
No,
yeah.
9th. Wouldn't it not be?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be 9th overall.
Because of... Wait, there's only 2
There's
Wolverines.
Yeah, so...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
don't know.
5 plus 2 plus new one equals
It doesn't
9.
matter.
Yes.
All you need to know is that this one has the cast from First Class and Days of Future Past, which is James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, Evan Peters, all of the
Nicholas Hoult.
Nicholas Hoult,
Easily the big ones.
the young X-Men, basically.
Yeah.
Although this
They're
is
now the middle-aged X-Men.
Younger X-Men.
We'll get onto this.
this is a very good point. They are now supposedly middle-aged, even though they look exactly the
Well,
same
this
as
is
they did in
20
First
years.
Class.
The only one that doesn't look older is Jennifer Lawrence, but she's not supposed to age at the same rate as them. They do say that in X-Men First Class. They do say you age at half the rate of a normal person.
I get that, but at the same time, they don't look 20 years
They
older.
don't look 20 years older, but they look slightly older. Like, you know, he's got a beard.
Slightly.
I think
He's got a beard, Jack. Not Jack.
hair's longer.
Ow.
No, it's because I'm used to yelling at Jack, not at you.
Okay.
Take it as a compliment.
Yeah. I'm used to yelling at Jack.
To be fair, I'm going to side with Ben on this. This is one that one of my little pet peeves with the kind of the new franchise is the fact that they're like, oh, we've got to make the next sequel 10 years in the
90s.
future.
Everything
to do
has
a new
to be in a different decade.
And
Well,
it's stretching
It's
the patience
kind
a
of
little.
cool, but at the same time, you wish they'd spent more time in, particularly the 60s.
Hmm.
There's lots of cool stuff in the 60s they could have done.
I think the way, and to kind of kick off this review as well, the way I think about this as a trilogy, it does hold together quite well as a trilogy, which makes me kind of nervous if they do another one. But the way I think about it is, First Class is easily the slickest and most stylish, Days of Future Past is easily the most clever, and Apocalypse is easily the most brutal,
Yeah.
and like the darkest
It
of
is
the three.
surprising. We were saying, me and Chris were talking about it, we did say, like, this could be pushing the 12.
Oh,
Yeah.
to its
definitely.
limits, yeah.
Even at the very beginning, when you see kind of
It's
the
not
prologue,
like
it's
you have
very
you have
violent.
the fairly brutal violence, like particularly in that beginning.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't think it's spoilers
people
to
being
say that,
crushed and-
person gets
And then
pushed into a little
there's
cube.
one particular sequence, like 2/3 of the way through, with a certain character that is the most violent that character's been in a while. And then, as well as that, you also have the standard X-Men swear word
Yeah.
for film.
Which again is used really, really well.
Yeah, they always use it well, don't they?
But to kind of crush this into a plot, this is 10 years on from Days of Future Past, so the mutants are kind of out in the public now. People know that mutants exist. Raven's running around doing all sorts. I don't really know
She's
what
like
she's supposed to be doing.
liberating
Mutants or whatever. And Professor X and Hank McCoy are kind of running the Xavier School for the Gifted. And
Magneto's just
Magneto's...
living a normal life.
He's off living a normal life with a family in Poland somewhere.
Yeah.
And
That's the biggest curveball at the start of the
Yeah.
outset, I think, is that Magneto's actually kind of gone a bit of, development. He's kind of gone into his own. He's like he's trying the Charles route, as he
Exactly,
says later in
yeah.
the film, to distance himself and not be a kind of
It's-
advocate for mutant rights, etc.
it's a nice little kind of aside from the whole, because it gives them a bit more depth, I think. And I think Magneto definitely, of all the X-Men in this film, because there are a lot of them, because they bring in new Jean Grey, which is Sophie Turner, new Cyclops, which is Ty Sheridan, what's her face? I can't remember the other one.
Cyclops? Who? Which one? Storm.
Storm, that's the other
Storm
one.
you meant? Okay, I think
Storm, and then you got Archangel
Nightcrawler.
as well, Nightcrawler. So there's like a whole load of new old X-Men, new versions of old X-Men.
Yeah, the first half of the film really does follow a kind of a structure of this kind of roster building thing.
Yeah.
Xavier's building up the school. Then once Apocalypse has been awakened, he's building up his four horsemen.
We should actually say that. So
Yeah.
Apocalypse
Is the bad guy.
Yes, he's the bad. He's the oldest mutant. Presumably, they think the first mutant.
It's an old Egyptian pharaoh that had
who's,
mutant powers.
Like, been sort of represented as a god because back then they didn't know what mutants were, and he's now after like being asleep. after being
3,500
betrayed, he's
years.
Sleep since the Egyptian era. He now wakes up and is like, "This world isn't the one that it was. And I'm mad about that." He watches
Rage.
some TV and just like anyone would, if they just old TV, it's just like I'm done, and decides to just smash everything.
So he builds a little army of mutants
yeah,
to fight, and he decides that the only way he can kind of properly destroy the world is to get inside Xavier's head. So they kind of clash, and stuff happens.
and then they fight
They fight.
There's a big fight.
They fight.
That's it. And then you throw in like various other things,
Side
like
plots and
strikers back and things.
Yeah.
But that's the gist. Yeah.
It's a very long film. I didn't feel the
I
length.
didn't feel like it was.
But it is a long film, and there's a lot crammed into it.
As long as something like Civil War or Age of Ultron.
I'm yet to see Age of Ultron. I'd say
see Age of Ultron.
the other one,
Civil War.
Civil War. Yeah. I would say it was longer than I expected, but in a good way. It never dragged. It was definitely building to this, climactic brawl down. Like I was saying, they're both building their rosters. You're getting this big fight built up. And I think there's a lot of anticipation for that because on the one hand, it's a bit of a limitation. You get these really fantastic mutants being like added to the roster, and half the time all they're doing is standing around behind Apocalypse, and you're like, I can't wait to see them use their powers. I can't wait to see these guys battle.
Yeah.
I do. That's one thing with the X-Men franchise. Perhaps I was feeling like I feel like their fight scenes are a little bit lower budget, but maybe that's because they do less VFX. Perhaps I don't know.
I do think you're right. I think that like someone like Marvel or even with Batman and Superman, they had great fights.
Maybe just coming off the back of seeing Batman versus Superman.
They do action debatably a lot better, mainly because it feels like they have powers that are better suited to it. Apart from like Wolverine, a lot of the X-Men just have powers that involve them standing and
laser beams and energy. Yeah.
But at the same time, I've always thought this, and I still think it now, that X-Men have done a much better job, especially considering how many characters there are, of actually developing their characters.
Definitely.
Like, people talk about how the MCU have done like such an amazing thing where they get all these characters and do an ensemble thing and balance them all. And the X-Men have been doing that since the early 2000s, and they've always done it well. And they still do it well. Like, yes, there are some characters who do get a bit silent, but they're gonna. And that's because they don't, instead of trying to give everyone an arc, they always just pick the important ones. So it's Charles, Eric, Raven, this time Cyclops, and a few others.
Yeah.
But they pick who are the characters they want to develop, and they develop them. And I was thinking when I was watching this that not just because of this film, but because of X-Men First Class and Days of Future Past, I care about these characters more than I do about the people in Civil War. And that's not a criticism of Civil War. That is that I've had more time with these characters. They have been developed better throughout, and I do care about them more, and I think that that's what X-Men specifically does better than the other superhero franchises.
I think I get what you're saying, and I know I can kind of understand why, because this film has been really critically savaged.
It's like at 52%.
I know, but that's
on the
harsh. That's harsh.
But it's not savage, is it? That's
over
half.
I've seen more negative than I have positive.
Have you?
Yeah, I've seen at least.
I've seen about half and half.
Yeah. But I think that's because I don't read that many reviews full stop. But pretty much all of the ones like Empire, a couple of other like the bigger blogs and stuff I read are all like 2 stars. And I think a lot of critics are taking problems with this is because they take on a few more character stories than normal. Usually,
Civil War.
I know,
and Civil War did definitely like.
Let me finish.
This bothers me because there's a clear. I'm not like I know there's this stupid, and it is stupid, where people go like, obviously Marvel's paying critics, which isn't the case at all. But I do think there is a definite bias, and these critics go into the MCU ones, praising them for things that they'll then criticize the other ones for doing the exact same thing as. Because Civil War definitely had characters like Hawkeye who just showed up and went, "Hi, I'm here." So it doesn't make sense. Continue with your point.
What I mean is, a lot of people, they're used to First Class and Days of Future Past, where it was always Magneto and Professor X. They were the leads in all these, and suddenly they're not really the leads. Professor X doesn't really do anything. Magneto arguably has the best character moments, but again, he's a lot smaller than he was in the other films. I think that kind of annoyed them a little bit, and they weren't used to having these other kind of characters coming in. But to be honest, like, I've always, when I used to watch the cartoons, the old X-Men cartoons, Cyclops was always my favourite.
Everyone says this. I find it really strange.
Then when James Marsden started playing him in the early Bryan Singer ones, I hated him. I really hated him.
A lot better.
This like Ty Sheridan is a really, because you can kind of he has got the arrogant stride to him because that's the character. But at the same time, you can kind of understand where it's coming from now. You get a bit more depth, and it means they're building up this newer cast so much better.
He has more screen time than the other Cyclops did across. Well, now 4
Probably true,
Days of Future Past.
Well, I think that leads on like to a very interesting thing with this film. I think is whilst we've discussed it as like the third film in kind of a second trilogy.
Like
it's also
trilogy.
Exactly it's this kind of intersection of like I feel like it's also the sequel to First Class. If Days of Future was the bridge to the old one.
Yeah.
This is like the sequel to First Class that's almost rebooting us with X-Men again with the...
There's so much stuff
going on.
going
It does so
on.
much. It does
Yeah.
so much. And somehow it's like... You just accept it for what it is. And I think a lot of the critics that have savaged it have just not accepted that. Do you know what I mean? They're like, oh, there are too many characters being developed. Oh, there's too many people not getting enough time. But they're not just seeing that, like, yeah, Jean Grey and Cyclops and stuff, they're not supposed to be the main characters in this. They're teeing them up and introducing these characters
It's no
to
different
us.
than the other X-Men
Yeah.
films. Like X-Men 1 and X-Men 2. How much did you know about Cyclops? After
Very
them?
little,
You knew
yeah.
nothing,
Yeah.
but they love those ones.
That's what I
Yeah.
like about X-Men is the fact that they can just introduce new characters without having to give you a bloody origin story
yeah,
for the
yeah.
umpteenth time.
No, I agree.
You just kind of
And
see them.
There,
and
there
you,
are a lot of things that you know, the fact that it's brutal. That's something that Marvel would never do.
Oh,
there would
yeah.
never be this level of brutality.
I can
and
see why
characters
they did
actually
it.
dying. There are
Yeah.
characters that die in the X-Men universe. In like, I don't want to.
and you don't hype it up
Civil
with free
War,
trailers
but-
and a hashtag.
Yeah. But the MCU have not killed off any superheroes, and it does make you sort of think, what are the stakes here? Where X-Men, they're dying all the time. People
I
are just
think-
being killed off left, right, and centre.
think that's the
and
thing.
it's brutal.
With X-Men, they've got more characters, they are dispensable. And I feel like Fox, that is the way they're trying to make themselves different.
Yeah.
Because now Deadpool came out R-rated, made loads of money. The next Wolverine's going to be R-rated, making loads of money.
Imagine
They're
R-rated
kind of-
X-Men.
They are literally, I
Good.
don't know if they're waiting for that, but they're definitely paving the way for a much more brutal, like, what universe.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that's awesome.
I think it's cool as well.
But-
I'm excited for where they're going to take it with X-Men as well. Like
Hmm.
Deadpool and R-rated Wolverine aside, I think the new cast, like I think Harrison said as well, some of the most enjoyable moments. I think the young cast. It's cool to be back in X-Mansion, having some
Definitely.
teen characters and some teen superheroes
Yeah.
because, like, without being really cliche, it's fun to have some goofy people
Yeah.
like experimenting with their powers. They're not just
Hmm.
socking everyone across New York and smashing down buildings. They've got this kind of moral compass. They're
You
like
get-
they don't want to abuse
Can I
it.
have
Yeah.
one more like mini rant? And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I'll-
yeah,
then
go
I'll
for it,
shut
go
up.
for it.
Okay, I'm tired of people picking on that stupid Return of the Jedi moment. It's like all these critics think they're so clever because they take that bit where they go, oh, they say the third one's the worst and this is the third one and it's the worst. They think they're so clever. They've
Yeah.
all used it. It's not clever. Stop.
It is the worst, though.
I don't think it is.
You think it's worse than First Class?
I think it's worse than First Class and Days of Future Past. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad film. I think you'll see when I do the rating at the end of the review, I'll explain what my ratings
Yeah.
for the other two are. But I think
I haven't even thought this far
I
ahead,
think
actually.
I linked with Days of Future Past the most because I liked the connection between the
Yeah.
old and the new.
Because
I
it was
thought,
smart what it
and
did.
I liked the way they used the period setting and the time travel and all that.
Yeah.
I loved First Class because not only was it Matthew Vaughn doing amazing action like he always does, but they rebooted the cast really cleverly and the powers were used so slickly, really, really cleverly. This one did feel like an old school, like Bryan Singer X-Men
Yeah.
movie, which isn't a bad thing. I just didn't like it as much as the other
Yeah,
two.
definitely.
Should we actually go into some of the
Yeah.
specifics now?
When
I
go
just-
into the criticisms anyway, because I have.
Can I just-
okay.
One
yeah,
overall
go,
point,
go,
just
go.
to lead on from that, is a lot of the criticisms have been on Bryan Singer is he's almost doing a best of Bryan Singer and he's taking some of the best moments from his
Cool.
best ones, which I think is cool and I enjoy, but I do take that point as well, I think. But also it's his final one, so I guess why wouldn't he
Yeah.
want to kind of go out with a
Exactly.
bang, celebrating his best moments? And at no point was I like, yeah, I've seen this before. I was like, yes, we've seen this
But
before and he's doing it better.
People like it when they do it with Star Wars or something.
Yeah,
It's just-
exactly,
It's,
so-
again, it's just people just apply different rules to the X-Men for some reason. I don't get it. Quicksilver's cool. I like
Quicksilver does have a cool moment. This is what I wanted to pick up on though earlier. Quicksilver comes back in this film and basically does a very similar sequence to
Yeah.
what he did in Days of Future Past, but a bit
like
bigger.
It's escalated. Yeah.
My problem is Quicksilver hasn't changed at all. He's the exact same character as he was in
But I
Days
think
of
he's
Future
meant
Past.
to just be. A
That-
cool, like,
that's not necessarily a bad thing,
character.
and they do try and give him a little bit of backstory here, and I did really like that. But at the same time, I felt like the scene they did was basically almost the same. I wanted something a little bit different, a little
I
bit
think everyone was
bigger. And,
anticipating it because in
Yeah.
the hype they were saying, yeah, we're bringing Quicksilver back. We like the response he got from the fans. We're playing him up a bit in this
Yeah.
one.
They're not gonna change
I
it, are
think
they?
I think everyone was expecting it and they kind of had to deliver it. I'm not sure where else they could go with
Yeah,
the
I
character and the
felt
way
like
they
they
used
did
it.
because, like you said, they did make it bigger, and I felt like they made it noticeably bigger.
Also, they
And-
did it so big that
Yeah.
they couldn't make it bigger. And then when you think that they're going to do it again,
Yeah.
they undermine it really well, I think.
I think I want to
thought it
see.
was really good.
I
We
want
were
to see
just all
more.
grinning. Me, you
Yeah,
and
we
Jack
were like
just-
Jack was in hysterics
Yeah.
with the pizza dog.
I did really love it. What I'm saying is, I just like to see him use his powers with the other X-Men a little bit more. Like, see him in battle with the others, rather than just being like, this is the Quicksilver moment, the trademark Quicksilver moment, where we're gonna play a pop song in the background, and everything slows down, and you get to see him run around being goofy. Because if you're waiting for that in every single film,
I'm happy to
eventually
wait
it's
for
gonna
this.
get tiresome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
think
there's
they'll
only
have to do
two
something
now.
different in the
I'm-
next
I'm-
one.
I know, but I hope they don't do another one. Is what I'm saying.
Okay, well that's fine.
Yeah,
but
and I'd like to see him
Or
because
doing a really throwaway moment that's not an action scene.
yeah,
in the
well,
next one.
even just him, I'd love to see his powers in action with the others. I don't know how they would use him in the team up sequences, so it would be nice to see that. But and my only other problem with this film, now we're going into specifics, is Apocalypse as a villain.
he's fine.
Yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah.
fine, but I feel
I've
like
seen much worse.
for someone I've seen worse, but at the same time, I feel like for a villain for a movie like this, which is quite a big film,
Yeah.
and it's such a culmination of things, and he's supposed to be arguably the biggest bad they've ever really
Yeah, yeah,
faced.
definitely.
He's just kind of bland. He doesn't really. He's got no personality. I can kind of understand that, but when you've got an actor like Oscar Isaac,
Yeah.
who's incredible, and he's got the opportunity to do something a bit more with it, and you're basically just saying, okay, just play him as a guy that's angry.
Yeah.
In fact, there's not even really that much anger to him.
Yeah.
He's just kind of a bit annoyed.
Yeah, his powers remain really undefined as well.
Yeah, you don't know.
He can kind of turn stuff to sand, and he like do this
Exactly.
kind of Egypt tinged kind of.
I was saying with my brother on the car ride home, we were trying to figure out what his original power was. Because
Yeah.
his power is basically he goes around picking up other people's powers.
Yeah.
But like, what did he start with? How did he?
I think it was the
How did he get
transference
there?
of.
I think that's
Yeah.
just his starting
was
power.
his one.
That would only make
Which
sense, wouldn't
which
it?
does raise the question of how he discovered it.
Exactly.
One day he was just like, I'm just going to
Get
lie
an
at the table
out-of-body
and hopefully
experience.
something will happen.
One thing though, I think about Apocalypse was, oh my god, okay, hold on, was the like Egypt, like his kind of pre-titles intro prologue kind of thing was actually really cool. I thought,
because
it was so cool.
and those cool
Yeah.
Because it was
mutants
cool
with their
seeing
cool
mutants
powers,
in
yeah.
Egypt time. You're like, oh my god! And
I
then
wanted to see
I
more
started
of
laughing
that,
because then
yeah.
I was like, yeah, people want to see more of this. Now they're gonna do like a Scorpion King kind of thing.
had a really weird title credit sequence afterwards as
Yeah.
well, going through history.
Did
It
you
was-
like
Yeah.
that? Just out of
Yeah,
interest.
well, that's the thing. When I was watching it, I just thought, like, you know, Jack's gonna hate that. Like, it's such a, Jack loved it. I was so confused.
Because I saw one review that
Yeah.
absolutely savaged it and
I
said
thought
it
it
was
was
one of
alright,
the
yeah.
funniest sequences they'd ever seen because it was so terrible. But I was like,
Yeah, what?
I think it's alright.
See, that's what I mean. Just some critics are really smug and
Yeah.
themselves,
It was
and they're just
probably-
like they sit there doing nothing with their own lives and then just go, ha ha ha! I've laughed at someone else's hard work.
Someone put like 2 years of hard
Speaking
work
of which,
and effort.
I'll
I'll laugh at your pitiful review, critic.
But overall, because we have been rambling for quite some time,
Yes.
do you want to
Can I
make
add-
another point?
Yeah, actually, aside from Apocalypse, actually, I think Mystique was actually the weakest point for me because
She didn't really have an arc.
She doesn't have an
Yeah.
arc. She just pops up and like you guys were saying, what is she doing at the start? Like she's kind of
Yeah.
liberating mutants. She's just being really vague, and you don't know what she's trying to do. And then suddenly she liberates Nightcrawler, and then she's like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna go see Charles. And then there's all these moments where basically because this is another difficulty with the 10-year gap thing of people haven't like had time to meet each other like in between the last one, so they do this immediate they look at each other and you get like a glance from each character, and that's supposed to convey like their feelings for like what's happened in like 10 years, and it's so funny.
It's a bit much,
But
yeah.
at the same time, and I know I'm coming across as like a proper apologist now for the whole thing, and like, no, you're wrong with every single flaw, but they did just have an entire film beforehand devoted to Raven's arc. Days of Future
yeah,
Past
they
is
need to just
entirely.
drop
But that
her.
doesn't- that
she didn't
doesn't
need
mean
to
that-
have an arc in this at all. Like
Yeah.
they tried to
But
get her in.
yeah, they kind
too
of
much.
squished her in. They should have either dropped her or keep her,
They could
whatever.
have actually done this film
She kind of
almost without her. She kind of plays a bit of a role in the,
She-
in
yeah,
the final,
she-
in the basically for the pulling everyone together for the final.
She kind of has
act,
that little
but-
bit of a role, and she stands around being like, "Oh, I'm supposed to be the teacher now. I don't really know how I can handle this."
Yeah.
And they don't really develop it properly.
Yeah.
But
And she's not going to end up being like the badass assassin she's supposed to be, and she's now just kind of this
Exactly.
nabby-pabby kind of inspirational
But-
woman. Someone said, "Oh, okay, it's Candice with superpowers." Basically, is what they made her in this one. But
I wouldn't go that far. I think she is still Raven underneath. At no point where I was watching it where I was just like,
"See what you did there."
yeah. I was still like, Mystique is cool. So
She's still raving underneath, you know, because she like changes into like thingy,
Oh.
and then she's still blue underneath.
Oh.
All right,
Okay.
shut up.
I didn't necessarily do that on purpose, but never mind. But what we're saying is, although there are problems with it, overall it is a really, really fun and entertaining film.
Yeah, it's really, really fun film.
At no point, it's 144 minutes long, and I sat through all of the credits because there is a post-credit sequence, and I never got bored. So that is. Should we do ratings, Harrison?
Yeah. 9.
9.
9.
Oof.
Yeah.
Chris?
I hadn't really thought of this. This one's taken me a bit by surprise, and I feel like I need to rewatch First Class actually.
Do you want me to come back to you?
I'll probably no. I'll say it because this is what I'm saying now, but I know I might change it in the future after watching First Class. I think I'm going to go with an 8 for now because it was really thoroughly enjoyable. Makes me excited for where the franchise is going to go, and yeah, never got bored.
I know that Jack gave it an 8 as well.
Cool. I'm going to go for a 7, only because I was torn between a 7 and an 8. And the way I think about it, Days of Future Past is definitely a 9. First Class is an 8. So it makes sense that this would be a 7 if it's my least favourite of the 3.
Yeah.
But-
After my rewatch of First Class, I might end up agreeing with the Ben scale, but right now it's definitely an 8. Like straight out the theatre, it's an 8.
Cool.
Cool.
Awesome. So, should we move on to some more music? To set the tone for the next review, here's a song from the soundtrack of The Nice Guys, set in the 1970s. This is America with a Horse with No Name.